Alrighty, folks. Alrighty. Welcome back to Teabag Spartans. It's been a while. It's been about 2 weeks since our last podcast. I'm joined by my co-host Xander, as we say every week. Xander, how are you doing this week?
Doing wonderful. Can't complain.
Usually we cannot, can we? So here's the thing, Xander. I finished The Flood this week.
Great book.
It is a great book. The book was written by William C. Dietz, and it is, I think, above 300 pages, and we got a lot of content to look over. Because if you know from our first episode on the app Spoon, then you should know that, you know, we reviewed The Fall of Reach, and this is the follow-up book to The Fall of Reach. It takes place during the events of Halo 1, Halo Combat Evolved. So, but obviously, as we do in every segment of the first segment of the show, at least the podcast, we're gonna be looking over the Halo Infinite news, what came out this week in Halo Infinite, which, granted, we have some big things, like the new Halo Infinite concept art, which shows an elite Blade Master and Mark V2 Spartan armor. I'm sorry, I'm not very... I think that's... it's Mark 7 Spartan armor. Wow. I know my Roman numerals like that of a 5-year-old. But, Xander, have you seen anything on Halo Infinite as of this week?
So I did see the concept art for the Blade Master. I also saw the art for the Mark 7, which I do like the fact that they're maintaining the generational system that was put in place all the way back with the Mark 4. They decided it would be too expensive in their universe to constantly completely reinvent the armor, so they went with a generational system to basically roll upgrades into it. And I think it's nice. The Mark 7 of the original, the Gen 1, which you see in the Kilo 5 trilogy, as you see everything in the Kilo 5 trilogy, was pretty much only worn by one Spartan. It was very expensive. It utilized nano machines to upgrade and alter it to the individual wearer's liking, and because of the cost, which was even more than the Mark 5 and Mark 6, it basically got dropped in favor of the Gen 2, which it has its problems, but I won't list them all here.
You know, Xander, I do have a question for you. Was the Mark 7 the last iteration of the Gen 1 platform?
Yes, it was. I don't know of any Spartan other than Naomi 010 that actually got it, and the only reason that she got to field it was because of how closely she worked with Oni. I mean, all of the Spartans worked for Oni at times, but in the Kilo 5 trilogy, Naomi works specifically for Oni. So she got to play with the fancy newest toys.
Well, that's also because Naomi was written under Karen Traviss, and you know my very big hate for the author known as Karen Traviss due to the Star Wars novels that she's written. But we won't go into that because we are a Halo podcast and not a Star Wars podcast.
I don't like Karen Traviss any more than anyone else. I think she's basically the female equivalent of Brian Reed, which tells you how much I think of her writing talent. But I'll be honest, I thought the Kilo 5 trilogy was, at worst, kind of convoluted, but entertaining enough. I definitely don't regret reading.
Which is definitely, I think, the book that I'm going to be reading after First Strike, I must say. Going into that, we're gonna read this little article that was written in for the concept art of the Swordmaster in hushed whispers throughout the ranks of the banished. Jago Radomani names is spoken of with care. The Blade Master history is shrouded in rumor and half-truths. Some say he was an experiment, an affront to his own kind, rather. Others make mention of clandestine ambush gone wrong. Very few know the truth. Fewer still speak of it. One thing is certain: he has hunted demons before, and as the first recruit welcomed into the hand of Atriox, he will do so again. So we obviously know this guy is going to be facing off against the Master Chief, I must say. Because demons are usually referred to a Spartan, because that's what the Covenant referred to as Master Chief, and that's what they referred to as pretty much every Spartan. Like my boy, Frederick 104. Master Xander, what is your take on this?
So, there isn't enough information about this particular elite for my liking. It's posited that he's a member, or was a member, of the Silent Shadow, which, if you look into the background and the history of the Banished, they do have I guess you'd say a squad. I think it was a squad of Silent Shadow members who were hunting down the Jiralhanae, and when they came across Atriox on his Corvette, the Energy's Lament, they basically went in and tried to kill him, and instead of fighting, which is what they expected, Atriox reasoned with them. He explained, we're not the brutes that followed Tartarus, we are not the brutes of the Covenant, we had nothing to do with what happened to your people being displaced and then massacred. That's not why we're here. And the first Blade, I forget what his name was, but the first Blade was the only one that was still really pissed off, and as such was killed by his own men. So I would guess that the second Blade of that Silent Shadow unit is this particular elite. In terms of him being referred to as an affront to his species, my guess would be, if you look at the lore and the culture of the Sangheili, they're very much against the idea of augmentation. If you look, for instance, at their combat harnesses, they're not really designed to increase their strength, increase their speed. That's all their own. So if this is somehow a genetically enhanced, cybernetically enhanced, however you want to put it, elite, he would be viewed by his people almost like an abomination. It's one of the things that the Sangheili really didn't respect about the Spartans.
Yeah, definitely one of the prime things. So I'm gonna read out what the saying was underneath the Mark 7. So, created with input from Dr. Halsey herself, which we know then after 3 years in between Halo 5 and is it 3 years, Xander, or am I wrong?
I think it's 3 years.
3 years between Halo 5 and Infinite. Halsey has obviously gotten back to UNSC and is now benefiting the UNSC again. Created with input from Dr. Halsey herself, the latest Mark 7 iteration refreshes the Mjolnir technical architecture with breakthroughs in neural interfaces, shield emitters, fusion power, and armor formulation. The Mark 7 designation refers to a number of prototype platforms that test the ever-evolving Mjolnir Generation 3 standards. The most recent design to bear the name was selected by Dr. Halsey from Materials Group Keystone Development Program. Xander, how do you feel about this?
I mean, Halsey, as despicable a character as she is in the lore, really all the credit of the original Project Mjolnir has to go to her, and to have her directly involved in the recreation of the Gen 3, I feel like is very important. She had a huge influence on the Marks 4, 5, and 6, and I forget how much involvement she had with the Mark 7. I don't, from the lore, think she had that much, if I'm right, to do with the development and the testing of the Mark II, but by then the system was so known across so many companies, especially the company Songnam in the nation of South Korea, which is where the Mark VI was actually created, that they probably didn't need her to make the Mark II.
Yeah, honestly, that makes a lot of sense. So that is a 10-minute mark for that story. So now let's go into another Infinite story. This is one that I look very much forward to getting my hands on, which is the Halo Infinite Funko Pops are going up for pre-order. So this may be common knowledge for the Halo fans such as myself that likes to collect. And also, these Funko Pops seem to be coming up in October 2020. Halo developer 343 has partnered with Funko to bring fans some Halo Infinite themed Funko Pops. These include a new Master Chief as well as 2 colored variants of the new the Mark 7 Mjolnir armor that will be in Halo Infinite. The Funko Deco colored Mark 7 Mjolnir Funko Pop also comes with an in-game unlock for Halo Infinite. It's unclear what this unlock is, but there's a good chance that it will allow players to use the same pattern and color scheme as the Funko Pop for their Spartans. This gives me a lot of bad jujubes, because if that's the case, then that means we're not going to be able to color our armor specifically. You know how we've been able to do that in previous iterations of the games? So essentially, if we buy this Funko, we'll be able to color our Spartan in the Funko Pop's color, which is a great tactic for us to go out of our way to go and buy the actual, collectibles. However, it's also, rec packs were not great. So why include something where you can't even customize your Spartan colors? That's just, completely out of the blue. Xander, how do you feel about that?
Well, you said purchasing the Funko Pops, that'll have almost like a code or something attached to it so that you can then use that in-game?
Yes.
That's making me think, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, it's making me think of, the Amiibos that, I forget if it was the Switch or the Wii U had, and you could, insert them into games like Super Mario Maker. It's a really odd tactic, in my opinion, for Microsoft to use, because while it will increase their merchandising, especially for people who really love to customize, it seems like kind of a dirty-handed tactic. Like you said, rec packs weren't great. Microtransactions, even though I understand the purpose of them, are not great. They make a lot of players, especially players that are casual and younger who don't have a lot of money, it makes them angry because it becomes a play-to-win system.
Yeah, it definitely does. Because, when you... Because me and Alex was older than me. He grew up with a different Halo game. He grew up with the first one. I grew up with Halo Reach, which means I had such a high expectation for, customization in Halo. I loved Halo 4's customization, where you could customize even the legs. Because, in Halo Reach, you could only customize, the knee pads. But in Halo 4, you customize, the legs, customize the shoulders, the forearms, the chest, the helmet. It was fantastic. But then when you look at, Halo 5, it's there's, no customization at all. It's you have a preset armor, and you have a preset helmet, and that's it. There's no customization. And I know this from personal instinct. A lot of 3D modelers and art came out of the development of customization of Halo, because if you look at it, when you customize your armor in Halo, you want to wear that in real life, or at least some people do, which is where people go into the art aspect and try to make cosplays of their armor. So, it just removes that, inherent ability to just be able to, customize your own cosplay. Xander, you mind expanding on this at all, or we should move on from this topic?
I mean, I can't pretend to be a cosplayer. I don't really understand the artistic angle of it, but I definitely did see the reduction in Halo 5. And it's not that I didn't like some of Halo 5's armor sets. I said, oh, that looks pretty good. That looks pretty cool. But I was... how old were you when Halo Reach came out?
So it was 2010. I was 10 years old.
You were 10 years old. I was in college. So I definitely, having grown up with CE, where it was like, okay, if you're on the other team, you can be the blue guy. Going from that to Reach, where it's like, hey, you can put this tack pad on your wrist, or you can put this capture unit on the side of your helmet. I was like, that's pretty cool. They really did a lot of detail in this.
Well, yeah, and that's one of the things that came on along with Halo 3. Bungie knew that they had something going for them when they created the customization. Because in Halo 2, you could change the color and you could change your preferred species. But you didn't have the inherent ability to customize your armor. When Halo 3 came around, they just basically overhauled the game. They were just like, add everything. Add a theater. Add a forge. Add a multiplayer, add a campaign. They had everything, and had everything for every player. So when you consider that, then you know that you have a good game. I'm gonna pause the stream real quick, just for a little technical ability. We'll be back in a minute. All right, folks, we're back. My apologies, we had a little technical difficulty there. So, referring back to what we were speaking on before. Essentially what had occurred was, we're speaking about Halo 3's customization and everything. And when you consider the fact that, you remove the inherent ability to basically create your own Spartan, you remove a lot of, a fan base that enjoyed that. So, with these Funko Pops that this is not confirmed, but the speculation that you'll be able to use the color of the Funko Pops that the Funko Pops color, you remove the ability to create color for your Spartan. And that just makes it completely wrong. So, it's just another showing of what 343 doesn't have a comprehension of their own fan base at this point. Because, when they removed the spanker, that was a problem. And, it's just genuinely a dick move by 343, I must say. So, Xander, can I ask you how you're feeling on it?
I mean, part of me understands, and I've said this before, part of me understands that the gaming, I don't want to say the gaming industry has stagnated, but the pricing of games really has. You can't keep driving the price of games up. Nobody's going to pay $90 for a game. It doesn't matter how good it is. So doing things like rolling expansion packs, which cost money, and microtransactions is a way that these companies make their money and pay their developers. But at the same time, there's a limit. It's not, useful or fun additions that you're buying. I think the best example of it you'll see in Halo, is the Awakening, the Nightmare DLC. You're not buying something that's unlike the campaign and that gives the story new meaning. You're buying, buy armor, buy the chance to get, a couple of Blood of Subans or Province Banes and shred in multiplayer, or buy that, reach pack until you get, Noble Six's armor or Emil's helmet or whatever it'll be. It's not interesting. It's divisive,
and it's also gambling, and child gambling in the U.S. courts has been basically illegalized, which is one of the things that Call of Duty was actually going through, because kids were spending money on packs for Call of Duty to get like a certain gun, and they were like, yeah, kids are gambling on our game, which is illegal. But we're at
How did they get away with that one?
They didn't. So this is our 20-minute mark, so we're going to be going into our second segment of tonight, which is reviewing the book The Flood by William C. Dietz. I hope you all are anticipating as we are. We're going to go for a little pause here, take a break, and yeah, so let's get the music playing. Alrighty, folks, welcome back to the Teabag Spartans podcast. This is the second segment of the podcast, which, if I may say, if you have not read the book The Flood, skip over this segment because there will be major spoilers for the book and information that goes into the book. So, Xander, I gotta ask, can you give a little synopsis of the book?
Sure. So, pretty much, the book The Flood by William Dietz really is a shot-for-shot retelling of some parts of Combat Evolved from the Master Chief's perspective, but it also really expands on other events around the ring. We start with the captain of the Pillar of Autumn, Jacob Keyes, and his crew having discovered everything. We have a few moments with some of the Covenant commanders on board their ships. They talk about, sending in the landing crafts. They drop everything. They have. Humans fight back. Life pods launch, the first mission of Halo. Where really you get the first major departure is where you get to hear the retelling from Keyes' perspective of how he got captured by the Covenant. Because in the third mission of Halo, the Truth and Reconciliation, all you know is the enemy captured Keyes. So you're asking yourself, how? This book's going to tell you. And basically a rogue member of his crew, who was rather disillusioned with what was happening and felt that the Covenant wasn't trying to kill them, which they weren't, because they knew someone on the ship was the shipmaster and they wanted them for information. They were trying to take the bridge crew alive. And as such, this Ensign Dosky, I believe it was, if I remember, was so insubordinate that Keyes ordered his crew to tie her up and leave her there for the Covenant. And when they found her, they released her and said, "You show us which one is Keyes." And so they corner them, and she says, "That one." And then the elites kill everyone except for Keyes, including Dosky. So snitches don't need stitches because they're dead. Remember, folks.
Yeah, honestly,
you get
that happened.
Sorry, go ahead.
That is a true fact. You snitch, you're gonna die. Just FYI. Go ahead, Xander.
You get a little bit of interaction with the other human survivors on the ring, in particular the Hell Jumpers, which are led by Major Antonio Silva, who, if you've played the game Fireteam Raven, the arcade game, you get a little interaction with him. You also get to see Alpha Base in that. But basically all of the surviving personnel find a butte that is controlled by the Covenant that they say, that's got a good vantage point and a little bit of technology. We're going to take that. They take it over, they set up defensive positions, and they basically build a little impromptu base. They also raid the Pillar of Autumn to gather a bunch of equipment. You ever wonder where Foheimer got all those nice and fancy warthogs and scorpions from in Combat Evolved? Well, the Pillar of Autumn. Basically, again, a huge part of the book goes tit for tat. It's nice to experience sort of the inner monologue of the Master Chief, even though some people complain that removes the immersion because it's like, well, I don't want to know what the Chief is thinking in this because we project ourselves into the game since it's a first person. I really enjoyed it, especially the parts with the Flood, because there is quite a few times, not just with the Flood, but with the Covenant, where after an encounter, the Chief is rattled, back pressed up against the wall, eyes darting from side to side, really freaked out. And touching on the Flood, you also get to find out the fate of one Wallace A. Jenkins for our Combat Evolved lovers. You'll remember him as the Marine whose helmet cam the Master Chief watches during the mission 343 Guilty Spark. And I won't spoil it for you, but let's just say Jenkins doesn't go out probably the way you're thinking he does.
Yeah, no, he doesn't, and it's honestly kind of saddening. I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of sad.
Saddening, yeah, disturbing too.
Yeah, the fact that Jenkins was still fully aware of being a Flood, because when you see the Flood, you're like, oh, they're mindless zombies, dude. They don't understand who we are anymore. No, they know. No. They're well aware of what they're doing.
Another thing that you get is, for those of you who are Captain Keyes fans, and I am definitely a Keyes fan because of the expanded universe, you get to experience his dramatic struggle resisting the Flood as they incorporate him into the hive mind. And I really enjoyed the cutscenes, the Keyes cutscenes from Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary for the Master Chief Collection, but I personally felt like it really cheapened the experience. Maybe it's just because the book is so much more descriptive, but Keyes spends fair sections, talking about how he literally has to feed his memories to this thing in his mind to keep it away from finding the location of Earth. It is absolutely the most disturbing part. I think more disturbing than what happens to Jenkins, because Jenkins doesn't have any vital information he's trying to hide. There's nothing he's protecting. He's just wishing he could die. Whereas Keyes knows that if whatever this is finds the location of Earth in his mind, that it's pretty much over.
That's a fact, dude. Literally, and you know another character that I really enjoyed in this book.
Do tell.
Zuka Zamami, which was
yes.
He was an individual, which essentially he was trying to hunt down the Master Chief, and he was on this crusade, may I say, a crusade where he felt that like his duty was to kill the essentially to kill the demon. And at the end of the day, he ended up dying. And it was like, you kind of can figure that out at the end of the book, because Master Chief lived to be in Halo 5 and is in Halo Infinite now. So, I mean, you can't really assume. But when you take a character like the Master Chief and you pit him up against this stalker of an elite, because he was essentially stalking him, and going throughout like his day-to-day, you begin to think like, wow, he was so dedicated that he attacked the Butte, that the ODSTs wanted to find that demon. And there was a grunt that he was with named Yap Yap, And Xander, I'll let you explain who Yap Yap is because, may I say, fantastic grunt. He literally had Zuka Zamami eating out of his hands.
Yes, so the grunt called Yap Yap, not to be confused with Yap Yap the Destroyer from Halo Wars 2, by the way. A lot of people have confused that. Yap Yap was a file leader of a group of grunts during the assault on the Pillar of Autumn, when they were basically just doing a mild patrolling through the area of the airlocks where they had come through. They find Zuka Zamami injured. He had sustained a bullet wound in the head that had sliced along his temple, knocked him unconscious, given him some bruises and bangs. Please apologize for the door. And basically, Yap Yap figured, because he was very smart for a grunt, that if him and his file, the other 9 grunts, were to try and take Zamami out, it would take all 10 of them to carry him. Now, Zamami was what was called a Prophet's Blessed. He was one of the black armored special operations elites in Combat Evolved. Basically, the Halo 1 sort of concept of a zealot, if you will. He was very high ranking. He operated with a fair amount of autonomy, and so they realized, saving this elite, if we go to one of the assault ships and say you have to take this guy to the surface or he's going to die, they're going to do it. He's that important. And so that's what they do. And Zamami does survive. And to show his thanks, Zamami makes Yap Yap his personal assistant. Now, this is a really lousy detail because the elites who act as the special agents of the prophets, whatever you want to call them, well, they're basically fanatics that are willing to throw themselves and their men into the face of death to speed the great journey. And Yap Yap is not that kind of believer. But like you said, he ends up basically outsmarting Zamami in his own way. He manages to signal the raid on the Butte, and he lies to Zamami about where the Master Chief, the demon, is, so that Zamami takes him to where the Banshees are on the base. And when Zamami realizes that he's been deceived, he says, "I should kill you." And Yap Yap, huge stones for a grunt, aims his plasma pistol at Zamami's head and said, "You can try, but I wouldn't recommend it."
Bro, coming from a grunt and having killed a bunch of grunts in the game, that takes balls. And I love at the end of the story where Zamami was going to go try to kill Master Chief while Master Chief was going down an elevator shaft. And he actually ordered a bunch of grunts to bring a shade turret onto the actual the lift so he could just aim at the Master Chief. He made a final response to him like, "Good luck, Zuka Zamami," but he knew at the end of the day that he was gonna die. So Yap Yap deserts the entire Covenant, essentially. He loads up a bunch of methane tanks onto a Ghost, a day's worth of rations, and just takes off. Like, how do you do that? Like, this is a grunt we're talking about. And he shows more intelligence than any grunt that I've ever seen in the games. You know?
That he does.
And I wish we saw more grunts like that. And I can't really say, because the amount of books that I've read / listened to, I have read Fall of Reach, I have read The Flood now, I have read Hunters in the Dark, I have read Last Light and Retribution, I have read The Cold Protocol, which is one of my favorite books. So, you know, you got a good variety of individuals that, you know, dwell in this universe, but Yap Yap has definitely stood out as one of my favorite Covenant characters, if not my favorite Covenant character as of this moment, besides Usei Taha.
Yeah. There's really only one other grunt in the extended universe that I think intellectually comes close to Yap Yap, which is Dadab, who is a Ungoi deacon in the book Halo Contact Harvest. And fun fact, this isn't really spoiling anything major from the story, while he is preaching to the other Ungoi, because that's his job as the deacon, and he's talking about the world of high charity and asking if any of them has been to districts, one of them says, my cousin lives in the districts. He serves the Sangheli. And he said, what is his name? And he says, Yap Yap, son of Pum.
The thing is, there's a lot of grunts out there with the name Yap Yap.
I'm just assuming that it's a callback, you know?
It might be. I don't know when Contact Harvest came out, and I don't know when The Flood came out. Specific years.
Contact Harvest came out significantly after The Flood, but it was written by Joseph Staten, who wrote most of the cinematics and such for the first 3 Halo games.
Which, I know this was supposed to be part of the first segment, but I feel the need to bring it up. Joseph Staten has been brought back for Halo Infinite. So that's definitely saying something.
Can you say desperation?
I mean, it's not. I don't think it's desperation. I think it's going in the right direction.
Oh, I'm not arguing with you there. I think it's 1,000% the right direction, but I just think it's an interesting move on their part.
I mean, I guess. But, no, I think going further into The Flood, we're going to make some final statements because we're 37 minutes in, which means we go to the best part of our podcast, which is the Versus segment. And this week's a good one, where I will be pitting up Spartan Jai up against Alex's choice of Spartan Kurt. So, what are your final sayings on The Flood, and what's your rating for The Flood?
I would give The Flood definitely a solid 9 out of 10. As much as I loved Combat Evolved as someone who grew up with it, it was really nice to get a little bit of the internal conflict, some of the Master Chief's doubts, to see him a little bit more human, see the moments where he's afraid, and to also see what's going on with the humans that are on the ring around him. And you get a fair amount of how he's seen by the other humans, especially the ODSTs, who view him as something almost as alien as the Covenant. He's constantly referred to as a freak. He's treated like an outsider, especially by by the second in command under Keyes, Major Silva, who straight up says, the experiment that created you should never and will never be repeated. Spartan 3's in force.
Yeah, I agree. And Silva doesn't live to see it, and Silva's also kind of a dick.
Just a little.
Because he jeopardized basically all the humans' lives on that ship. Because as much as McKay, which is another ODST, which is much more intelligent than Silva, suggested to him, like, yo, sterilize the ship. He didn't listen, and it cost him his life. But no, going into it, you have certain side stories, which I enjoyed the side stories more than I actually enjoyed the stories of Master Chief in this book. Because, you live through Master Chief's eyes, essentially, throughout the campaign. I get it, you get a better understanding, but knowing what was going on besides Master Chief was a fantastic explanation to the whole story of Halo. And I really gotta say that it improved the quality of the story tenfold. So right now we're in 39 minutes, and we're going to be taking a break. I hope you all are enjoying our podcast for this week. Let's get the music playing, and we'll get set up for our next segment, which is our final segment, the Versus segment, which means that we're going to put up Jai against Kurt. So I hope you all are ready for that. Alrighty, folks, welcome back to Teabag Spartans. I'm your host, Jacob, and I'm here with my co-host, Xander, where we are now going into our third segment of the night, the Versus segment, where we'll be pitting up Jai against Kurt. Xander, I'm going to let you take it away tonight, and go ahead and explain Kurt.
Gladly. So, Kurt 051, or Kurt Trevelyan, which was his real name, was a Spartan II super soldier of the UNSC. He was born on the Colony World Circumstance, October 19th of 2511, and was abducted, as were all of the Spartans, at the age of 6, and was taken to be indoctrinated and trained. During the training, Kurt was one of 4 standout leaders among the young Spartans. Himself, the Master Chief, or John, Frederick, and Jerome were the Spartans that were noted to be the absolute best by Chief Petty Officer Mendez and Dr. Halsey. Kurt was regularly given command of Green Team during training, and it has to be noted that when facing off against Blue Team, which was led by the Master Chief, Kurt usually won. It was a fair tilt in his favor in terms of wins and losses against the Master Chief, because Kurt had a reputation for being able to sniff out traps and ambushes. This wasn't really something that he was cognizant of. He described it as a feeling, but it was something that was very acute in him. He had a wonderful situational awareness of danger. When it came time to name a leader of the Spartans, it was actually a pretty heated discussion between Halsey and Mendez, with Halsey insisting that John, the Master Chief, should be the leader, and Mendez, who was the actual military man and who understood leadership, vehemently disagreed with her, saying that Kurt should be the leader of the Spartans. What solidified Master Chief's leadership, of course, was the events during their final training exercise, or one of their final training exercises before augmentation. If you want to find out what happens, read The Fall of Reach. It's worth it.
Fantastic book. I gotta say, if you didn't watch
really
the first podcast on Spoon, you'd know that it's literally the perfect book. It is a fantastic book. There's not really anything wrong with it. It explains pretty much everything you need to know besides the game, the Halo Reach. You know, it is a fantastic book. So just give it a read. You don't even have to read any other Halo books. Just read that one in particular. But keep going out, Xander. I'm sorry about that.
No problem. So during a mission, I forget exactly what year it was. I believe it was roughly around 25-30. Blue Team, which then consisted of Fred, Kelly, the Master Chief, Linda, and Kurt, who had taken Sam's spot after he was killed during the Battle of Chi Ceti 4, were on a planet whose name I forget, recovering stolen warheads from what would become members of the United Rebel Front. But it was actually a trap. And while they were going in, Kurt had told the Master Chief, "This feels like a trap. Something's wrong. We shouldn't just be walking in here." And the Master Chief said if something comes up, tell me, but we have to keep going. It was a trap, and all of Blue Team except for Kurt were captured. As they were being, I won't use the word interrogated, but questioned by the leader of the rebels on the planet, General Graves, Kurt smashed into the building in a modified Warthog and killed all of the guards before releasing Blue Team from their restraints, which were actually neural inhibitor collars, which literally created a short-term paralysis. So even the Spartans in their Mjolnir weren't able to move with these collars on. They gathered the warheads, and they took off. And this was before they had energy shields, so they were in standard Mark IV Mjolnir. So armor-piercing rounds were a real danger to them. And as they took fire and the other Spartans hid behind the warheads to protect themselves, Kurt remained exposed in the driver's seat, risking his life to get the rest of them to safety. During a mission the following year to explore possible Covenant activity around a decommissioned UNSC salvage yard, Kurt experienced a catastrophic thruster pack malfunction and was shot into deep space 120 hours after the oxygen reserve in his Mjolnir suit was estimated to have expired. He was listed MIA and his file was closed. Little did his peers know that this was all an elaborate ruse by ONI Section 3 to abduct Kurt and make him the head of the Spartan 3 program. Over the next 20 years, Kurt would train 3 classes of Spartan 3s, Alpha Company, Beta Company, and Gamma Company, of which some of the most notable Spartans, and I will say the most notable Spartans of all, not just the Spartan 3s, including Carter, Noble 6, June, Emil, and Kat, were all members. What?
What about George?
George was a Spartan too.
I know. I'm screwing around.
Anyway, after the Master Chief destroyed Halo, the world which the Spartan 3's base was on, which was called Onyx, read Ghost of Onyx, by the way, fantastic book, became active, and the Sentinels on the planet began attacking the small number of Spartans that were still garrisoned on the planet. Kurt led his Spartans in a campaign against the Sentinels. It was a rough campaign. They were heavily outnumbered, and they also didn't have that much equipment. Matters were complicated when a distress signal that was sent to the UNSC on behalf of Kurt and the other Spartans was intercepted by a Sangheili warship, which then sent the Second Fleet of Homogeneous Clarity, which was being led by Fleet Master Voronar Manticree, to the Zeta Dorada system where Onyx was, to kill all of the Spartans and take the planet, which was believed to be full of Forerunner technology. Eventually, Blue Team arrives on the planet, yada yada. Kurt takes control. They find their way to a slip space bubble, which houses literally another dimension in it. Kurt orders Blue Team and all of his remaining Spartan 3s through, and when he comes face to face with the Fleet Master after being grievously injured, Kurt uses a pair of stripped-down Fenris warheads to kill himself and the entire Covenant ground army, thus allowing his peers to all escape. And that is the end of Kurt, unfortunately.
What were I don't mean to interrupt your thing, but what were Kurt's main physical attributes, like his
So Kurt was an absolute monster of a Spartan. That is something that really can't be understated. Kurt was the largest Spartan by a lot. In his SPI armor, Kurt measured 8 foot 2 inches tall. That is a foot taller than the Master Chief in full Mjolnir. And you have to remember, because the Spartans are augmented, that 8 foot 2, he's not built like a basketball player where he looks like a twig with a head on top. He was built proportionately. If you assume, and you have to assume, because the Spartans were engineered to be able to lift 3 times their body mass out of armor, if you assume that because of his increased height, he has an increased body mass, then his overall lifting and strength capacity would exceed the average Spartan by a fair amount.
Stronger than the average bear? Now that he's done with Kurt, let me go in at my boy Jai-006. My second favorite Spartan. Spy was born on Bahuj. I really am not going to be able to pronounce that correctly, but it's Bhuj. As a child, he was a orphan and was conscripted into the Spartan 2 program in 2517, alongside pretty much all the other Spartans. When he was told that he was being conscripted, he attempted to leave the compound, which happens quite a bit. But one of his trainers was able to take hold of him. Over the next 5 months, he repeatedly attempted to escape with another Spartan, Adriana 111. Every attempt ended in capture, but this only strengthens Jai's resolve to keep trying to new escape strategies. The trainers, after suffering broken ankles, lost eyes, fingers, and toes, eventually chose to shoot them with darts from the troop bays of pelicans after they tried unsuccessfully to capture them using stun devices on the ground. Let me just say this right now before I keep going on. Jai was a bit of a troublemaker through the Spartan 2 program. He and his fellow Grey Team members were most definitely the worst Spartan 2s, if you consider them, like, not worse battle comprehension, but worse for, like, maturity, The formation of Grey Team. Jai eventually sent to meet with Dr. Catherine Elizabeth Halsey upon telling her that he wanted to go home. She gave him the options to leave the Spartan 2 program on the condition that he undergoes selective neural paralysis. May I mention, he was told this at the age of 6 years old. Neural paralysis. She informed him that should he choose to attempt another escape, he would be shot with the neural paralysis dart and awaken in a city with no memories of the last 5 months. However, he was also told that drug reacted badly to children, sometimes erasing their entire memories. Continuing her speech, she went deeper into his head, asking him how he would feel if he forgot Adriana, whom he seemed to like a lot, and telling him that an orphanage he used to live in hadn't noticed he had been missing. The thought of losing his memory was enough to discourage any more escapes. The night after the discussion, Dr. Halsey, Jai made one final escape attempt, but after catching up with Adriana, he decided that it would be the best to return to base. The next day, Chief Petty Officer Franklin Mendez introduced Jai and Adriana to Michael 120, which may I say, Michael 120 is another Spartan. That is insane, because he literally attempted to steal a pelican and flew it into orbit. But, in other hands, who admitted to stealing a pelican by himself and blowing it up when the UNSC came after him. These three later became Grey Team, a specialized Spartan 2 squad that preferred to be far from the chain of command but deeply enjoyed fighting the rebels and the Covenant behind their own lines. After surviving the augmentation process, Jai became the leader of Grey Team. And we're going to assume that Jai participated in the first engagement with all the Spartans, as well as, was he at the Fall of Reach, Xander, or am I wrong there?
He was not at the Fall of Reach. Grey Team, by that point, was far behind enemy lines.
Okay. So, this is the Battle of the Rubble. During the Human Covenant War, Jai and the rest of Grey Team operated behind enemy lines, wearing havoc on both the Covenant and the remaining rebels. They flew through Covenant and Insurrectionist-held space looking for targets of opportunity in their ship and base. The freighter Peta, and I'm also not going to be going into the other Jai encounter because I haven't read the book, and I'm actually really looking forward to reading that book, so I'll maybe let Xander explain that one. So, essentially, I'm not gonna read this whole thing, but during the Battle of the Rubble, there was a jackal that was like supplying a insurrectionist held base that was built out of an asteroid that was receiving Covenant weapons, and the Spartans were like, no, and they basically took out the stuff, but they encountered who we may know as the Arbiter, Thel Vadame, while he was still a shipmaster, and Jai managed to best Thel Vadame, which has been said to be one of the best sword fighters in the Covenant.
It was a draw.
Wasn't a draw. He bested him. He ran away.
Wait, what? It was Jai ran away because he was getting shot in the face while
by other elites.
Arbiter, while the Arbiter was headbutting him. He had to run away.
Alright. Anyways, later career in 2551, Jai and the rest of Grey Team was deemed too inaccessible to be called to reach. They were not present when the Covenant invaded the planet. Having been out of contact for about a year, this was not cause to undue concern, as many of Grey Team missions had been executed in similar fashion. At some point at the end of the war, Jai and the rest of the Grey Team were captured by Sangeli Fleetmaster Rojak Hassan and put into stasis. When the UEG sent an envoy... Oh no, I just spoiled the book. Melody to meditate the crisis. Brewing on the planet Caro in 2058, the Office of Naval Intelligence gave her a covert assignment to find a way to free the Spartans and Grey Team. Oh, okay. So personality traits. Like the rest of Grey Team, Jai enjoys dangerous, difficult, and life-risking missions behind enemy lines. His position of leadership is somewhat tenuous, one both Adriana and Mike did not truly acknowledge. His command of the squad, somewhat to Jai's dismay, as a child during the Spartan training, Jai became friends with Adriana 111, and the two would often escape training compounds on Reach, just for the thrill, and actually attempting to abandon the project. Jai had little care for insurgents. He was originally unwilling to protect their lives on the Rubble residents, as he considered them all rebels and Covenant sympathizers. He disapproved of Adriana's apparent favoritism for Ignato Delgado, calling him Adriana's pet insurrectionist. Which, may I say, at the end of the Cole Protocol, Delgado was trying to enlist in the military, and he told the recruiter, basically, with two middle fingers, no. Which, may I say, that's ballsy. But, so, Xander, considering that, and considering that my man Jai took on Thel Vadame, what are you trying to say here, my guy?
So, if we break this down, as we often do, into a few different realms of consideration, I suggest we start with the two Spartans out of armor.
Oh, dude, I can say this right now. Jai is losing.
Yeah, big time.
Because even if you consider the fact that they're out of armor, augmentations considered, Kurt is 8 foot. Alright?
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but Jai is 7. Oh, wait, he's 8 foot 2. Jai is 7 foot. Flat. That means Kurt is 14 inches bigger than Jai. So he is standing already gigantically above Jai to the regular man, which is maybe like 5'9". That may be the average.
That's the average.
So the average height of a man is 5'9". Having a 7 foot Spartan be even smaller than an 8 foot, Jesus Christ!
So
But-
if we move on from there,
But with
and put
Jai's
them both,
unorthodox tactics and unwillingness to follow the chain of command and that of engagement, because, Kurt may be a good leader, but he is very by the books. Let me just say that right now.
he is by the books. I can't argue with you there. Actually, with the exception of Saren Osman, who becomes Admiral Osman, and Commander Musa, who becomes Admiral Musa. If I'm right, Kurt is the third highest ranking Spartan of all time. He is promoted to the rank of Lieutenant Commander before he dies, which would make him an 05. No, an 04, sorry.
Yeah, but the fourth highest Spartan, let me just ask, would that be Fred?
No, Fred's just a lieutenant. And if I'm right, I think Jerome... I forget if Jerome... No.
Alright, we're not going to go into that. We'll talk about
Doesn't
that
matter.
off screen. However, we got to consider the fact that Jai wouldn't hesitate to kill. I think Kurt would definitely hesitate to kill one of his childhood friends, even though he wasn't that close with Jai. He still grew up alongside Jai, and he would hesitate.
It's very possible that he would hesitate. Kurt is known for being very,
Human.
very empathic.
Yeah, so he would definitely hesitate while Jai would just kill. Because as said in the end of that little article that I read off of, Jai didn't even care about the insurrectionists of the Covenant. He just was like, y'all just Covenant lovers. So, in that case, I think Jai has the upper hand because, Kurt may outsmart him and may outbrute him, but give Jai a sniper rifle, put him at 500 meters, and just let him go. Because Kurt may be like a strategist, but Jai is a murderer, and I hate to say that for a Spartan. He is a cold-blooded son of a bitch.
I can't argue with you there, although despite the amount of time that Kurt spent out of action, which was a fair amount of time, 20 years almost training the Spartan Threes, when he was called back into action, having to fight both the Sentinels and the Covenant, he definitely hadn't lost his step.
Oh, I agree. But the thing is you also gotta consider the fact that Kurt, while maybe being out of combat for a while, also began to become more and more compassionate, which is a killer of Spartans, in my opinion.
It definitely is not an ideal feature. One thing I would like to touch on is the toughness factor. A Covenant hunter slammed Kurt in the midsection with its shield while he was wearing SPI armor, not Mjolnir armor. It swung its 2-ton shield into his midsection, rupturing his spleen, contusing one of his kidneys, and I think breaking 7 or 8 of his ribs. After that, he was shot by what was described as a cluster of jackal snipers, which destroyed most of his torso armor. And after being crushed in the ribs by a hunter and then shot by multiple jackal snipers, Halo 2 players, you remember what those guys are like. When Voro Manticore approached him, Kurt managed to rise to his feet and plant himself in a fighting stance, like he was ready to take the Fleet Master on. Pretty friggin' metal.
And to that, I gotta also say, Jai took on Thelvadame. So, also he basically took on an entire Covenant armada, essentially the one that Thelvadame was fighting alongside. Actually, no, he didn't take on the entire Covenant armada. He took on the invading covenant that was on the Rumble. So I mean,
They were just grunts.
Hey, there was like 1,000 of them. Remember Adriana? She was stuck behind that one mongoose.
Yeah, I remember.
And you know how the grunts had that rebellion that almost said high charity and rebellion, you know? You remember that? I remember that.
Yeah, how'd that turn out for him? Pretty good.
Hey, listen, they glassed their they glassed their homeworld. That would make anybody shut up.
If it works.
So don't try to down talk the amount of grunts. Because, you know, maybe one grunt would be not even a formidable foe for a Spartan, but when you consider thousands, then you got a problem.
That's a lot.
But this may be a little bit of a toss-up, so they seem to be a little bit on equal footing. I'm not going to say that they're exactly equal footing, and I got to say that Alex has a little bit of a knees weak syndrome with Kurt. Yeah, he's smiling at me right now. But I gotta say, this is a toss up. But I gotta agree. I think Kurt would win at the end of the day because of the fact that Kurt. Actually, you know what? I'm thinking about it now. He may have lost he 20 years out of combat, but he didn't lose any standards. I don't think anybody said that. Because if he got hit by a hunter, alright, man would try to kill the hunter, would he not?
Well, to be fair, he wasn't trying to engage the hunter when it hit him. Kelly, Spartan 087, had been, I forget if she had been shot or something had happened to her, and Kurt was actually rushing to try and help her when the hunter rounded on him and hit him.
I don't know, man, but, you know, I'm gonna go to the assumption saying Kurt would win this one. So, at the end of the day, my disgust, I have to say Kurt wins. But I would like to leave it up to you guys in the comments. Who do you think would win? We're gonna go. We're gonna go with the assumption. No, we're not leaving it. We're saying that Kurt wins on the bracket, but I want to see what people's arguments would be if Jai would have won or Kurt would have won. Comment down below, and you know we'll figure it out. But as of this moment, Kurt has won. So again, guys, I hope you enjoyed this 5th episode of Teabag Spartans. We are 7 subscribers strong, you know. We're getting up there. We're doing it. We're doing and I will see you guys all in the next one.
Have a good night, guys, and don't forget to follow the Instagrams.
It will be linked down below.